Welcome to this Step 3 review on diabetes management, from roadmap to residency. Diabetes is one of the highest yield topics on this exam, and it shows up in a handful of predictable question shapes. Today we cover medication titration, insulin initiation and adjustment, continuous glucose monitoring, and when to refer to endocrinology. The goal isn't to reteach endocrinology, it's to show you how these stems are built and how to dismantle them. Keep your question bank open, because these patterns are learned by doing. Let's get started. Here's the plan. First, we decode the anatomy of a diabetes stem. Then we build the titration mindset the exam rewards. We spend real time on insulin because the insulin adjustment question is where most people lose points. We cover sensor data questions and referral questions. Along the way, we work 3 full practice questions and walk through every answer choice, because knowing why a distractor is wrong is what separates a good score from a great one. Strategy 1. Decode the stem. Every diabetes vignette hides 3 numbers, and you should hunt for them before your eyes drift to the answers. 1. The hemoglobin A1C. 2. The exact medications and doses. 3. How long the patient's been on that regimen. Together, those 3 tell you whether to add a drug, change a drug, or do nothing. Then look for the barrier. Writers love to plant a reason the patient isn't at goal. Skipping doses, can't afford the medication, terrified of needles. If a barrier is named, the correct answer almost always addresses it before escalating therapy. Escalating on top of an unaddressed barrier is one of the most common traps in this subject. Strategy 2. Think in ladders. This exam rewards orderly escalation and punishes dramatic swings. Metformin stays unless kidney function forbids it. A second agent gets added, not swapped in. And 3 months is the standard interval before you judge whether a dose works. So watch for 2 traps. The choice that abandons a working drug for no reason, and the choice that judges a therapy after only 2 or 3 weeks. Both are wrong. Now the part that wins points. When 2 agents lower glucose about equally, the stem hands you a tiebreaker: heart disease, heart failure, chronic kidney disease, obesity. Those comorbidities aren't scenery. They point directly at the agents with proven organ benefit and weight loss. The distractor is the older, cheaper agent that lowers glucose fine but ignores the comorbidity the writer worked so hard to mention. Now insulin, where most people lose points. 3 rules. Rule 1. When a type 2 patient needs insulin, start basal once daily and titrate against the fasting morning glucose. Nothing else moves until fasting is at target. High fasting, the answer is increase basal. Rule 2. The single most tested pivot in this subject. Once fasting is at target but the A1C is still high, the problem is no longer overnight. It's after meals. Add mealtime coverage to the largest meal, or add an agent that works after eating. Pushing basal higher here causes lows, and it's the trap answer at the top of the list. Rule 3. A patient waking with sweats, a racing heart, or documented 3 a.m. lows doesn't need more insulin. Reduce basal or shift its timing. Any answer that increases insulin with documented nighttime lows is wrong, no matter how high the A1C. Let's put that to work. Find your 3 numbers. A 58-year-old man with type 2 diabetes returns to clinic. He's taken maximum tolerated metformin for 9 months. His A1C is 8.4%, up from 8.1. He takes every dose. He has established coronary artery disease and a BMI of 34. Kidney function is normal. Most appropriate next step? A. Stop metformin and begin basal insulin. B. Add a GLP-1 receptor agonist. C. Add a sulfonylurea. D. Recheck the A1C in 6 weeks. Work the 3 numbers, find the tiebreaker, and pick. Let's walk it. 3 numbers. The A1C is above goal and rising. He's on maximum metformin. 9 months, well past the interval to judge therapy. And no barrier, because the stem tells you he takes every dose. That's the writer closing the adherence door on purpose. So this is a true add a second agent question. Now the tiebreaker. The stem planted 2, coronary artery disease and a BMI of 34. Metformin stays, you add, and the comorbidities pick the agent. A GLP-1 receptor agonist has proven cardiovascular benefit and drives weight loss, serving both tiebreakers. The answer is B, the distractors. A abandons a working drug and jumps 2 rungs for no reason. C, The sulfonylurea lowers glucose, which is why it's tempting, but it causes weight gain and lows and ignores the heart disease. When a cheap agent lowers glucose but ignores the planted comorbidity, it's the distractor. D is the do-nothing trap. 6 more weeks when he's been above goal and rising for 9 months. The answer is B. Here's the insulin pivot. The question I want you to remember from this whole video. A 62-year-old woman with type 2 diabetes takes basal insulin nightly plus metformin. Over the last month, her fasting morning glucose runs between 95 and 110. Her A1C is 8.6%. Her readings 2 hours after dinner are consistently above 250. She's had no lows. Most appropriate next step? A. Increase the nightly basal. B. Add mealtime rapid-acting insulin before dinner. C. Stop metformin. D. Continue and recheck in 3 months. Look at the fasting number, then the A1C, and ask where the gap is coming from. Here's the whole question in one move. The fasting glucose is already at target, and there are no lows. That combination is the exam telling you basal has done its job, so the gap between a controlled fasting number and an A1C of 8.6 has to come from somewhere else, and the STEM hands it to you. Readings after dinner consistently above 250. Adding rapid-acting insulin before the largest meal targets that excursion. The answer is B, the distractors. A is the classic trap, sitting first for a reason. The A1C is high, so more insulin feels right, but pushing basal higher when fasting is at goal drives overnight lows. The fasting number is the guardrail. Once it's at goal, basal stops. C removes a drug that's helping for no reason. D ignores an A1C of 8.6 and waits 3 months. The answer is B. Now sensor data. When a STEM hands you continuous glucose monitoring numbers, they're never decoration. They're the answer hiding in plain sight. Look for time in range, then look harder at time spent low. A patient with a reassuring A1C but frequent overnight lows has dangerous swings hidden inside an average that looks fine. In that patient, you reduce or shift the offending dose. You don't intensify. The other flavor asks who benefits from a sensor. The recurring answers: the patient on multiple daily injections, the patient with recurrent or unrecognized lows, and the patient whose readings swing wildly day to day. The distractor is the well-controlled patient on metformin alone with steady readings. Match the technology to the actual problem. Here's a sensor question. A 45-year-old woman with type 1 diabetes uses continuous glucose monitoring. Her A1C is 6.8%. Her download shows 12% of readings below 70, most between 2 and 5 in the morning. She's stopped noticing when her sugar drops. Daytime readings are at target. Most appropriate next step? A. Reduce the nightly basal. B. Increase the nightly basal. C. Add a bedtime snack and change nothing else. D. Congratulate her and continue. Don't let that A1C fool you. Read the sensor data. An A1C of 6.8 looks excellent. It's meant to. That's the trap. Then you read the download and everything changes. 12% of readings below 70, clustered between 2 and 5 in the morning, which means that beautiful average is partly built from lows. And she's stopped noticing when her sugar drops, so she's lost her warning symptoms, making the next low far more dangerous. So you reduce the nightly basal. The answer is A, the distractors. B is the direction you never go when lows are documented, whatever the average says. C is the interesting one, a partial answer, and partial answers are hardest to reject. A bedtime snack treats the symptom but leaves the excess insulin in place and asks her to eat around a dosing error every night. It doesn't fix the cause. D rewards a number and ignores a patient who can't feel her sugar dropping. The answer is A. Finally, referral. The exam refers the patient the primary clinician can't reasonably manage. That means type 1 struggling on multiple daily injections, a patient not at goal despite several agents including insulin, recurrent severe lows or lost warning symptoms, pump or sensor management the clinic can't support, pregnancy and a diagnosis that doesn't fit, like a thin young adult labeled type 2. In those stems, referral isn't passing the buck, it's the standard of care and the correct answer. But the trap runs the other way just as often. A newly diagnosed patient with a mildly elevated A1C doesn't get referred. A patient who just hasn't started a second agent doesn't get referred. A patient at goal needing routine screening doesn't get referred. Sending an ordinary patient to a specialist is the too much answer, and doing too much costs the point just as reliably as doing too little. Let's bring it together. Find the 3 numbers, look for the planted barrier. Add before you swap and let the comorbidity choose the agent. Titrate basal against the fasting glucose, and the moment fasting reaches goal, stop raising basal and cover the meals. When lows are documented, you always go down. And refer for complexity and failure, never for ordinary care. Now go drill diabetes questions until those 3 numbers jump off the page. Pair that with a trusted review course and the current professional society standards of care, updated yearly and free online. Read every explanation, even for questions you got right. Visit roadmaptoresidency.com for expert tutors and advisors who will build you a personalized study plan. If this helped, please like and subscribe. Good luck on your exam, and we'll see you in the next one.